Hello everyone, I'm ranking the original 21 missions of Stronghold Definitive Edition by difficulty, but before we do, let's go ahead and take a listen.
Greetings, sire. Your stronghold awaits you.
That was fantastic. Now let's get started. So, a list like this is of course highly subjective, but there were times when I thought I was losing my mind, especially in some of the more difficult missions. So I guess it's nice to have a reality check. Without further ado, here's the list. At spot 21, mission 1, Gathering the Lost, only requires you to gather 20 meat and 40 wood. Finishing the fort, the second mission. The objective is just to gather 35 meat and complete the castle, which basically translates to building an enclosed wall. And then mission 3, all you have to do is kill the wolves on the map. So, I guess it's of note that these 3 missions are 3 missions where you can't set the difficulty. So respectively 21, 20, 19. They probably each get a little harder as they go along, but that's where I'd put these. At the 18th spot, I'd put mission 4. This is now the first mission where we can set the difficulty. It's called Hidden Lookout. The objective is to eliminate all enemy troops. The challenge here is that cheese is your only food source you can use. And cheese is a pretty slow gathering food source, so a bit of a tighter space to kind of build on. So you also have to eliminate all the enemy troops, but other than that, that's kind of your first more non-training mission per se. Spot 17, we have mission 6. This is the Rat's Proposal. So the first objective in this is you negotiate with the Rat. You basically have like a small force you start out with. They're all going to get killed. You're going to lose, which immediately brings you to the second objective, which is to eliminate all enemy troops. You get a stronghold, and from there you can build up your base and take out the Rat. So it's a little confusing, a little bit of a swerve there, but that's definitely 17. 16, mission 5 is Between a Rock and a Hard Place. The objective again is to eliminate all enemy troops. This is the first mission to introduce the bakery. Bakery is slower to get started, but once you do get it started, it is a potent form of gathering food, I should say. I think the challenge though from this though is you have less space to build up a bakery economy than say mission 6, which you can also do. Having less space for me proved to be kind of challenging. Spot 15, mission 10, the snake hunt begins. The objective here was to achieve a population of 100 and then have 75% of your people be blessed. Biggest challenge here was that the stone and fertile land is in front of the base. You also get attacked by animals early, i.e. like rabbits or wolves. Rabbits come in, ruin the crops, wolves come in and attack the wood villagers. Just having a tower off to the side seemed to help a lot with that. So it's difficult to wall early though, especially the first attack. But once that wall is in place, it just kind of becomes a waiting game, particularly for the 75% blessed people. So the mission kind of takes longer than I feel like it should, but it really kind of comes down to just sorting out your beginning and going from there. Spot 14 is mission 8, which is called Dealing with the Devil. Your objective here is to acquire 10 ale and eliminate all enemy units. Again, you have very limited fertile land, and the fertile land is in front of your keep. So the limited land and then the fact that you have to share that land with your bakeries for wheat, I think makes it a little more challenging than mission 10. So I think that's why I placed it there. At spot 13, I have mission 7. It's called Breaking the Siege. So the objective again is to eliminate all enemy troops. I recall this mission because it was one that was probably the first one I had to restart probably multiple times. This is a mission where all the wood and stone and your defensive resources are really far away from your keep, and there's really nothing you can do about it. They just give you the starting keep. So you basically have a very unoptimized economy, and you also have fairly limited wood building space. So There's minimal room for setting up wheat and bakeries, so that's part of the challenge. And then the force you get attacked with, you're attacked literally right away. It's quite a sizable force, and you have to basically kind of march your army across the map. And they pretty much will get there just as they're getting to the wall, so you don't even get to kind of get a few shots off to even help you take some sort of advantage. So yeah, mission 7, breaking the siege, was definitely a challenge. It's spot 12. I have mission 11, First Blood. Another eliminate all the enemy units mission. This is basically the opposite of the last 2 missions where you work with limited land on the list. Now you have too much land. So that being said, stone, wood, and iron were further away. They could be closer, but you run the risk of having little land to work with. You do get to start with your keep. I placed it further away, but it gave me a lot more fertile land to work with and build up a larger, more sizable forest. It's definitely difficult to full wall, especially around the edges of the map. Holes in the walls caused a lot of problems for me in this setting. Choices for starting, again with the keep, where you place that, going to have a significant impact on what you want the challenge and the defense to be. So for spot 11, mission 13, this is Snake Eyes. So objective here is to kill the enemy lord, the enemy lord being the snake. So I kind of wish this was how the last mission of the game would work, when you have to fight the wolf. You actually get a base and you have to defend, and then from there you actually go forward while building your army for attacking. You get to build that army and then attack the snake. This is the first mission with Siege. There are lots of choke points. There's a river and there's a lot of choke points. These help, but they are spread out across the entire map, which makes it a bit difficult to disperse the troops, especially in the beginning. Also easy to have a hole in the wall. But attacking the snake and being able to replenish soldiers makes this easily the funnest siege mission in the game. I think every other mission after this is going to have a fixed number of people to start with. We're entering the top 10 now, so here's number 10. Mission 12, the Ransom. This is where you would acquire 12,000 gold, but before you do that, you start with sappers. You destroy this wall, you rush the keep, and then you spend the rest of the mission defending the keep you just took. It's kind of like a two-parter. Taking the keep isn't particularly difficult. It's just slow going, especially waiting for the sappers. Being able to speed up helped a lot with the attack, and then the defense afterwards, though, is where it is difficult. You can wall off a chunk of the map, but you get hit with large attacks, and they're pretty early once you have everything there. And then, of course, because you've taken the keep, you have to destroy a lot of stuff because it's not built, in a way that's completely optimal. That wall, though you do build, is quite large. Once you do get it fully down, getting the gold afterwards isn't the most difficult thing once you have enough people up there defending it. Spot 9 is mission 16. It's called Fighting Retreat. So the objective here is just to acquire 400 stone. It's the first mission with pitch, but also the first mission with heavily armored pikemen. So not unlike the prior stone mission here, your stone again is very exposed. But as you build out from the starting wall, creating a wall to the left in front of the stone becomes possible. There is a ton of oil, and therefore lots of pitch. So having archers, regular archers on the wall, and the torches, and you get them to shoot the pitch and set all these heavily armored soldiers on fire. Once you get that down, it is actually a very satisfying mission. You can burn a lot of people real quick, and it just reminds you of like the big plays you see in a lot of classic RTS games, so very cool. But there is plenty of land once you spread out, although the initial start is pretty difficult. You got to make those shots count. You got to put the pitch in the right spot, and there's a little bit of a luck element, and people not completely taking out the stone that they start you with, or the stone mining. So yeah, kind of tricky, but it was a lot of fun. Spot 8 is mission 19, Penning in the Wolf. So the objective here is to kill all the enemy units. Surprise, surprise. This is the first mission with mangonels, where you can add those to towers. However, the enemy will have trebuchets, so this might have the least amount of building space out of any mission. It's very tight. And the market abuse is definitely necessary to beat this, and building the moat is essential. So having multiple towers with mangonels to the west is pretty critical. And then the pitch too helps. You can kind of arrange it so like the moat leads a very narrow path up to a drawbridge, and then you cover that with pitch. And once you do that, you get a very lethal funnel that will take care of anything that actually gets that far. So it's really the tight amount of space that makes this very difficult. With the limited amount of options, you won't have to try over and over to figure out how to beat this. There's only so many things you can do. At spot 7, mission 14, the mountain pass. So another eliminate all enemy units. Also has a very limited amount of building space. Traps are introduced for the first time. They can be somewhat helpful, but they cost so much wood. It takes a while to get them as they spread out, but if you do have a surplus of wood, of course, auto selling it at the market is a possibility, or investing in the traps. There's just a very limited room to get eco-military buildings set up. The attacks come early with siege and large forces. Dealing with the enemy siege and keeping your melee units alive in the early game was key for me. This mission gave me a lot of trouble. So I felt like at the time it probably shouldn't have it. Even now, still kind of have that feeling. But it's mission 14. I think I even lost the first wall. I had to fall back to the second wall, and then managed to build up another force that was able to stop that final attack. But it's a rough one. So spot 6 is mission 9. This is called the Rat's Last Stand. I think the game does a pretty good job of linear progression, especially in the early part of the game. We're mostly kind of in order here, but mission 9, Rat's Last Stand, it's a short one. All you have to do is eliminate all the enemy units, but this is definitely the first mission I can remember where I wanted to absolutely rip my hair out. I had so many restarts for this. It was a lot, possibly the most after the first and second place numbers on this list. Fortunately, most of these restarts will happen within the first 2 minutes, which is a big part of why I've got it further down the list. It's not something that gets harder later on. It's just that first attack. If that first attack goes badly, which it often does, becomes difficult to beat. Even afterwards, it's still very difficult. This is also the first mission to introduce the pig, and it has to be, I think it is the shortest mission, possibly barring the first 3 missions, although I might be mistaken there. You have to begin by digging them up quickly, and the attacks that come are large and quick, so you don't get crossbows in this. I think that hurts a lot, and you only get spearmen, and this is where the enemy will have catapults, maybe for the first time. It's definitely a pretty early mission for them to have siege. So taking the siege out though with only archers and no crossbow, it takes time, and they get a lot of shots and do a lot of damage to the wall. The stone is of course at the front, and it's near the spawn point. It is absolutely terribly exposed, basically making it difficult, near impossible to replenish damage under your walls. I ended up building a drawbridge towards the back just because the only entrance is the front by the spawn point. Doing that allowed the wood and some of the food I had growing in the back to be a bit more efficient. Your stone is a big problem here. The market basically becomes your friend, especially when it comes time to replenishing the stone or repairing things. The moat too is a lifesaver, and just getting enough archers to shoot everything is kind of the key. So at spot 5, I have mission 20. This is much wailing and gnashing of teeth. This is the objective where you eliminate all the enemy units again. That's the last true defend the base mission. So this, the volume of troops that attack you is probably at its greatest, and the quality of those troops are definitely at its highest. You get hit with a lot of things here. Defending this traditionally was very difficult, and it would be up higher if you couldn't use the moat and pitch combination basically to create paths of death, which make this a lot more doable. At this point, you now have all the technology in the game, and you can be a bit more creative with what you're doing here. The combination of pitch, moats, and funneling everyone into an area where you can just set them all on fire makes a mission like this much easier than it probably was intended to be, It's very challenging though. Even with that, it was quite challenging. You do definitely, in my case, I lost half of the base right off from the first attack. I just could not stop the trebuchets, didn't have the units with the range to do that. You do have to get all your pitch shots to land early on. You don't have a whole lot of pitch replenishment, so that part is definitely difficult. It's a very fun mission though, pretty much the epitome of defend the base and stronghold. Number 4, spot 4, we have mission 17. This is Smoky Bacon. Objective here is just to eliminate all the enemy units. This, kind of like mission 12, 14, and 19 are other missions where you start with a crappily built base, where you have to destroy most of it and then rebuild it. That helped me a lot, but I had 2 really huge problems here. Holes in the wall, especially early on, usually near the top of the wood, always led to an instant death in the first attack, and then burning oil. Burning oil and getting them to drop the oil, it worked most efficiently when I'd set them to auto, but that was very risky because they would just drop it wherever, and if they decide to drop it on your side of the wall, you know, you were basically SOL. So manually clicking or manual microing this basically was not ideal. Early attacks with strong troops in this are very difficult to repel, even when you are hitting the pitch shots and being fully walled. Stone and iron again are far away. It was very difficult to build the crossbows you need. Market abuse was probably necessary. Once you get that up though, it becomes more doable, but it's a brutal. It's a lot of space to wall, and it's kind of brutal to just get going with this one. So, spot 3, I have mission 21, Final Vengeance. This is final mission of the game. The objective is to kill the enemy lord or the wolf. This, I don't think it's any coincidence at this point to say that the final 3 missions are siege missions. Controlling units and microing them is just not a stronghold strong point. This requires a lot of save scumming, and your siege and archers around to basically just get to the perfect points to pick off enemy siege towers where they don't get hit. I don't like the idea of save scumming, but there comes a point where you just kind of have to do it, and these types of sieges kind of force you into it. You know, you move a little, too far forward with your siege thing, you lose the siege thing, and now you don't have the proper resources to complete the rest of the mission. You have to start over. That kind of forces you into that save scum. So there's some luck elements to this too. I remember at one point I was able to release a bunch of dogs that helped kill a ton of people for me on their side. Running your cavalry through the pitch and igniting it so they take minimal damage. Your army that's going to basically have to dig the moat is another thing you kind of end up doing here. Again, wish this was like the mission where you kill the snake, but it's not. So it's not. This was not a particularly fun mission for me, unfortunately. And it being the end of the game, that kind of is your final memory of the campaign. So that is unfortunate. That being said, of the 3 limited soldier siege attacks in the main campaign, this was actually the easiest one. It was also the longest, and a big part of making this easier than the other 2, or why I have it ranked lower, is because you are able to build trebuchets, and they outrange everything. And that was not the case in these final 2 missions. So the trebuchet, I think, you can actually systematically go through this with the trebuchet and get through it. And then you have to just do a couple fancy things with the archers and the siege units that block the arrows. So we're at spot 2 now. This is mission 18, End of the Pig. Again, like mission 21, this is where you kill the enemy lord, and this time it is the pig. And this is not the first time you assault the pig's castle. This is the second time, so you should be familiar with this map. It's similar to the other mission where you assault the pig's castle, but you have more soldiers and siege. Actually, it's a lot more soldiers. I just wish I could have brought home the turkey if you had brought home the bacon. In a nutshell, and not unlike the last mission, you don't have the trebuchets. You have to take out as many enemy archers as possible, and then you have to dig your way across the moat and use your siege tower to let your heavier infantry in, and at which point they have to basically make a mad tower-to-tower dash to kill all the archers they can, until they can get directly to the keep and finally kill the pig. Basically, this is It's kind of a kamikaze mission, which of course means save scum. Once you got that moat dug, you know, you're basically kind of save scumming to see if you can get the heavy troops in. The enemy has a ton of pitch on the ground floor, that's why you go tower to tower. You still have to make one final run through it. Your goal is basically to get them to kind of trigger the pitch before you actually make the run. Not always possible, or maybe you get them to trigger it too late and most of your soldiers get up there to kill the pig. But yeah, it is a tricky one. Don't forget about the pitch outside the keep. So after all this, we are now at the number 1 or most difficult mission, at least in my opinion, from Stronghold. This is mission 15, Carving a Path. So as I alluded to at spot 2, being the second assault of the Pig's Castle, this is the first assault. All I can say about this mission is it sucks. And I could say that about the last 2 missions on this list, but there's just a very special place in my heart for this one. You have a much smaller force than mission 18, End of the Pig, and you only have basically a couple of ladders and 1 ram, and most importantly, you're on a timer. And it's not quick, or it's not long. So, like mission 9, this might also be the shortest mission, I'm not sure. But you will spend by far the most time on this mission. This is basically ultimate save scum. You can't even bull rush the enemy lord for the win because everything must die. And God help you if an enemy soldier leaves the castle at the beginning after you've moved your army off to the side to attack from the one spot you can literally dig a moat and attack from without losing everything to the archers on the towers. You know, if you have that one soldier that gets out, which happened to be, you're going to lose because the pig's army shows up and you didn't see or kill this one enemy unit, you know. So it's
Weasel turd!
I would say for the main campaign of Stronghold, it just really never got any worse than this. I've only seen this mission work by attacking from the east, digging through the moat there. It's only a matter of getting any surviving archers into one of their towers. Your mace men go into the tower to finish all the units. Basically, you're hoping if enough of these people left to deal with that pikeman horde at the front of the base, and the crossbows at the front too. So this is one of the best parts about Stronghold, is to come up with different strategies to beat the mission. But this mission, there is only one way. I could see other ways, even for the previous 2 sieges, but this mission is so friggin' insane that there's just no way other than do one very specific thing, and it's borderline cheesy. Well, there you have it. These are the main campaign missions in Stronghold, ranked according to difficulty. My question for people here who played this game is, how would you rank these missions? Feel free to put in all 21, or if it's easier, just the top 5 of the most difficult in the comments. Any feedback, of course, is always appreciated, so thank you for watching. And of course, if you'd like to support this channel, please like and subscribe.